Hello and welcome to the channel. If this is your first time joining me, let me just say that this channel features a variety of different drawing and artistic content. We do a lot of Zentangle drawings like we're going to do today, but I also do cartoons, creatures, science fiction drawings, and a host of other just general drawing fun. So hopefully if you're joining with me today, you'll grab your pencil and your paper and pen and you can draw along with me. I'm going to start with the traditional corner dots. I'm going to put them a little further to the outside than what I normally do, just because I want to give myself a little more room for several of the elements. And this is just helping us frame that position. And I know that these pencil marks are quite hard to see on the camera, but hopefully you can follow with me here easily enough. I'll go over them again, make them a little darker. Now that we've got that border defined, the general area here, I'm going to make another line just inside that. I want to have some reference points for elements in the drawing. So I'm coming just inside that initial border and basically creating another border. Then within that, I want to divide this into some sections, almost like a grid, even though we're not going to be using a grid pattern. I'm going to do roughly thirds. And just coming down here, and then roughly the same thirds again. So take a look at where you're making your pencil marks. It should divide the drawing area into thirds. So now we've got our basic grid. We can pick up our pens and we're going to begin with our first pattern. We're going to start right about here where those two lines intersect that we created with our third divisions, and we're going to draw a nice sized orb. Not huge, but reasonably large. And then we'll just aura the outside of that. And if you're not familiar with the term, aura just means to create a parallel line with another line. And you can see I'm not going for a perfect circle appearance here because I like that more casual, hand-drawn look and effect. And it's also the nature of Zentangle. So now we're going to draw some wavy lines that come out in the four quadrants here. You don't have to go out terribly far, but just a little bit like that. And now we're going to just kind of follow those lines and create 3 or 4 auras, or what are called tethered auras, meaning instead of staying entirely parallel, they are tethered at each end. So I'm going to draw 3 or 4 of those tethered auras along each side. And don't worry about a perfect aura pattern here. We just want to create this appearance. And we'll do the same for all of these. And you can vary the space between those auras. Again, this isn't rocket science. We're drawing a floral shape here. And you can see I'm not being very precise at all with those auras in terms of them actually following the other line. I'm just using that as a guide for placement in creating an interesting petal shape for this flower. And now we'll do the same thing, but in between these other shapes. So bring out another line and just fill it in the same way. 3 or 4 tethered auras on each side. And I like the purposely imprecise look to this tangle if you do it like I'm doing it. You could, of course, labor very carefully to keep all the different components exactly the same, but it would produce an entirely different effect. Now we want to do this same basic pattern, but in between what we have here. Now, since there's not room for the whole thing, what we're going to do is we'll draw our line up and just then draw like almost like a little triangle shape behind there where these lines will meet to create a more full looking flower effect. Before we continue with the next section, we want to do a ribbon shape. So sort of right here, if you look at where our middle square is on our grid, we're going to connect that with a nice ribbon piece. We'll draw a slightly curved line. We'll come down like this, and then draw another slightly curved line. And once we have that, we want to make another line up here about that way and keep it roughly the same width. It can be a little smaller in the back there. And then we're going to do one more that comes down like that. Alright, and now we can connect these ribbons here with the appropriate spot. Just like that. And we'll come back and deal with this a little bit more, but now that we've got that in place, we can continue on. So we're going to add two more of these flowers here, but smaller, one on each side. So I'm going to bring mine down a little bit. I want this one to remain the central focus, but I want to bring two little flowers on each side. So what I'll do is maybe nestle them largely or half of that flower behind, and I can do that by drawing my orb, that initial central orb, already partly behind that flower. And then what I can do is make my little initial lines that come out. Of course, that one's going off behind. And then we'll do the same process we did a few moments ago, but with our new position here and slightly smaller flower. Now we'll do the same idea over here on the left side. Now, where we've got this area here, let's just ink this in all black, where there is no flower, but it's behind the ribbon. Let's also ink in this border. And now we're going to bring in our next tangle pattern, and we're going to start with a simple leaf shape. It's going to almost be like a flux shape, but once we lay that leaf down, we're going to draw a line that comes out almost like a cross that goes through the back part of the leaf and then across this way. And then we're just going to lay an additional series of leaves right onto these little bars that we've drawn. Now we can add some details in here, and we're going to vary some of this to give a little different impressions to these leafing flowers here. But then what we do is to draw the next one, we draw the leaf directly from the existing leaf in between. So I'm going to bring it out here. Then I make my little X or cross, however you'd like to think of it. And then I add my leaves to this. Now you can vary the sort of angle of these leaves to make them more like they're dropping or hanging in different directions. And we can also add little different details to the inner portions of these leaves, just to give some variety to it. So now we'll take our next one. I'm trying to get a hold of my tile there. And we'll draw it out from here. Draw our little X or cross. And let's do a little bit different design here. Let's add some dots in here. No particular pattern, I'm just following roughly that shape of the leaf just to give some visual variety. And we'll continue this now. They can go over and under each other. Let's see if we can get some of that to happen here. I'm going to draw one that comes up there. So here I'm going to draw purposely behind, just to show you how we could do that. We just have to think about where those lines would go and how they would go. And we just do something like that, and it looks like that one's kind of buried in the background there. So let's add a few dots to it just to make those background leaves more noticeable there, even though it's the same as that one right next to it. That's okay. And so some of those will just disappear right behind one another. So now wherever we have our flowers that create a closed off area so that the petals are leaving a closed area within, let's ink that closed area. This will also help our petals to stand out a little more, and we'll see some of those different shapes more easily. And if you come across a spot that you think is really large and you're thinking, boy, I don't want to ink that whole area, then you could just create another flower in there or another set of leaves, kind of like I did over here. And now that we have that, we look at this outer edge and we go from this dark, nice contrast to sort of wide open. And sometimes that's completely fine. But what I want to do is make that seem less stark. And we're going to do that by, instead of inking in the entire area like we could, we're going to add roundings to this outside edge. Now we've done these before in other projects and other tangles. It's where we simply connect existing lines with a little bit of ink weighting. And you can do this wherever the pieces seem to warrant it. So if you see that outer edge, and it just helps that to look a little more finished or a little more included, if you will. And so you can judge the size of that rounding for your own drawing and your own pieces there that are sitting there. And sometimes it might be a smaller little area, and sometimes it might be larger. But we just want to bring all these pieces together, and this kind of connects them that way. Sometimes people think of like the old wrought iron artwork that was done on fences or gates and things like that, where the various iron pieces had connecting parts like this, and it just helped hold everything together. It was part of a necessary physics of the whole thing, but it also added to the appearance and added to the design and the style of that type of sculpting or artwork. And so we're just doing something very similar here, connecting all these wire frames, so to speak, with a heavier piece of ink metal that holds it all together. And that's just a silly way of thinking of it, perhaps, but if that helps you visualize what we're doing, then there you go. And that's all we're trying to do, is just connect these pieces and make them more cohesive. Now we need to decide what are we going to do here in this ribbon, and we can do all kinds of things. We could say, let's you could put a little phrase, a little keyword, somebody's name, whatever you want to do. I'm going to just I'm just going to write in the word create. I'm not going to do any fancy calligraphy, but I am going to try to make the letters a little more appealing to look at. The last thing we need to do for our tile to finish it up is to put a border around it to kind of bring this whole thing together. Let's do a variation of this. It's a tile or a tangle called Miff, but we're going to do a slight variation on it just because I think there's not enough space to really get a good effect for it. So I'm going to first of all just close in the border area, following largely that pencil line that we created at the beginning, because that will just help keep things connected here for us. And looks like my line could come down in here, I guess. I had to try to see it with my poor eyesight. Just like that. And now what I want to do is create some little, they're kind of like U shapes, if you will. I'll show you here, a little, or like a staple. Maybe that's the way to think of it. A staple that's got a little rounding inked weight to it here. And then I want to leave some space, maybe 2/8 of an inch or something like that, and we'll just create some more of these. They don't have to be exactly the same size, but roughly. And we'll draw these all around this shape. Again, leaving some space in between for what we want to do in a moment. And just ink these guys in a little bit. Give them a little heavier weight. And then we'll follow that around the whole outer border here. And now in between I'm going to draw 3 little dashes that just add some additional variety here to the border. Once we have that, we can add some shading. I'm going to add graphite around wherever there's an overlap in these flowers. And then on our borders, I'm going to add, on the ribbon, I'm going to add a little bit wherever these pieces kind of folded onto each other. And now wherever these flowers, if there's any overlaps here, let's accentuate that with some graphite. And up here with these, we could also add a little bit to these background pieces, maybe just to help show that they're a little further back. And that might again help with some tonal variety in the drawing. And now let's start blending this and see what we end up with. Alright, now the last part we're going to add some graphite is in between these, or in these little staples, as I call them. So maybe just add a tiny bit of something here to our flower centers of as far as a tone. So I don't really want to shade it in or color it. So I'm just adding a little bit of graphite so it's just not a bright white. And I think overall that looks pretty good, like we were going for here. I am going to make my ribbon stand out a little bit more by retracing with a slightly heavier pen. We could even bring some heavier ink to some of these petals if we wanted. Again, just to bring out a little variety in what we see and how our eyes perceive these different shapes. This simple kind of retracing or redefining a line sometimes can make more of an effect than you would think, more of a helpful effect. I think I'm also going to add some boldness to these letters. As I look at this, is bring this a little more in line with the Miff original step out, even though I'm not adding some of the rounded shape to this background border. I think that this can be helped perhaps by adding some boldness to this. It might just help frame this a little better since we have so much other boldness down in the drawing. This little fine dainty lines gets lost. I hope that you enjoyed drawing this design with me today, and I thank you so very, very much for taking the time to watch the video and hopefully, better yet, to draw along with me. Until next time, take care.